our victim may be, identified as male. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, so, we have all these movements about domestic violence. We have women's shelters. We have the conversation all the time about women being abused in their relationships and how it impacts the children who watch it and things like that. But you don't hear the other side of that where, I mean, it's kind of like, she's a woman. How could she abuse you is the conversation more so than this woman is abusive and we need to address her abusive tendencies. It's
Right.
the men feel, I can't say anything. I can't do anything about this. So,
Yeah. I think even just having conversations and recognizing that abuse, oftentimes, abuse is this overuse of power and control. And we don't think that women can have power and control over men. But it is not so much a brunt force, even though there can be physical abuse where the man absolutely is the victim and the woman is exerting power and control. But just verbal abuse, psychological abuse, gaslighting, all of those things can absolutely be done where it's not a physical push or force, where the male can be the victim, right? And I think often our societal norms are that men are supposed to be, right? Strong, tough, you push through, you make it, and that is the opposite of me being able to say I was hurt, I was harmed, I was maybe taken advantage of. And so I even think within males, I feel it's probably some type of internal conflict, because just in their nature and their makeup, that testosterone, doesn't put them in a place where they want to feel weak or taken advantage of and things of that nature. So, one, just recognizing that it can happen to me if I'm a male, right?
right.
Two, then being able to kind of say that, hey, I put myself, I don't want to say I put myself in a situation, but I'm in a situation. There we go. I'm in a situation where I have been, taken advantage of, and now I've got to work to get myself out of that, whatever that may look like. Just being able to say those things and it not affect their manhood, their masculinity, their stature in society. That has to be the aim, I think, to, like you said, push this conversation along.
Okay. So you used a term that, you hear all the time, right? Like, it's kind of like toxic. People love to talk about toxic relationships, toxic family members, and, on and on and on and on about toxic. But one of the terms you just used is gaslighting. And, I have encountered my share of narcissists. And, I always find it interesting that they talk about how everyone is narcissistic, right?
Yeah.
Like, everyone has those tendencies. You can't label me as one because everyone has the tendency. But it's like the gaslighting. So I want you to be a little more specific in terms of what that actually is, because I don't think everyone has a clear definition, number one. Number two, I just think that once you know what it is, you can recognize when you do it. You can recognize when it's done to you. Because one of the things I think we forget and we don't want to tell people is we allow ourselves to be in these situations by not recognizing the things that are happening. So, I don't 100% understand what gaslighting is, but I've known enough people to know, okay, wait, what? Have that moment.
Yeah. Yeah. And so gaslighting is the use of manipulation to make the other person question their own thoughts and their own sanity, right? So I question, like, Devin, what is it that you're doing? Why would you even do that? And you're like, well, man, wait a minute. Why did I do that? Like, was that okay? maybe I should. So anytime where you are like, no, what I did is okay. I, I know that, right? But you get manipulated into thinking that it wasn't, because the other person, is questioning you, is manipulating you, is taking advantage of the situation. That's gaslighting. Okay. And so you're right. If you're dealing with some narcissists, they are not going to be the ones to probably admit their fault or admit they're wrong. So what do I need to do? I need to get you to own whatever it is that you said or did that may be putting me in a negative light, or maybe saying that I was incorrect or wrong. You need to own that now and say that you were wrong, so then I can be right.
And I'm laughing because, we assume that they have an issue because they do that, right? Like, you assume this person is a narcissist because they do that, but some of us just do it because it's easy to do.
Absolutely. So don't think that, just because one symptom is present equals the diagnosis, right? Like, we can't say just because I lack motivation, that means I'm depressed. No, we got to have a whole bunch more,
Right.
things in there to get the diagnosis, right? But gaslighting is just one form of manipulation. There are many forms of manipulation, right? And so we got to take all of that into consideration. But I don't believe that we do a good job at talking about manipulation and verbal manipulation as a form of abuse, right?
Mm-hmm.
And understanding that utilizing manipulation is our way of trying to exert power and control over someone. And that can be a really bad thing. Now, again, one time here, one time there, I'm not saying that's abuse, right? That just may be real bad communication. It may be passive aggressiveness, right? But if you've got a pattern,
right,
of a behavior or a pattern of choices that someone is exhibiting, then that's a different story, right?
right. And to tie it in with this week's theme of unknown, I feel like a lot of times we don't understand those behaviors in ourselves, therefore we don't understand it in other people. And
Sure.
you talked about just because you do this gaslighting thing a few times doesn't make you a narcissist. But you mentioned being passive aggressive. And people often laugh at me. I prefer the aggressive person because I know what to expect when I give you bad news or I do something, like, I know you're gonna blow up. I know you're gonna punch a wall. I know you may even come at me like you're gonna hurt me. But I know what that reaction is gonna be, and I can prepare for it and plan to give you the bad news over the phone or not talk to you. Like, I know what to do with that. But a passive aggressive person gets under my skin for so many reasons. One, I don't like to be told you're fine and then be expected to then ask you what's wrong at the same time. So how toxic can passive aggression be in any relationship?
Very,
Yeah.
very toxic, very not good, very bad. Because it, how do I say this? It continually leaves this unresolved thing, right? Like, you can't close the circle. We can't get to a resolution, a compromise, an understanding, because there's always some underlying thing that's not being expressed or said or brought to the table. And when we can't have that assertive dialogue, where I give silly examples like, if I can't say, yes, I like mustard, and no, I don't want ketchup, right? I got to be able to say, these are the things I want, these are the things I don't want, and say them, and it'd be okay, whatever I may be talking about, right? And we be able to have that dialogue. So if I just say, well, no, I don't really like condiments at all, but then I expect you to know that I want ketchup, like, what? Like, that doesn't make it, no one would say that that would be okay. And it's a silly example, but people then start to see, oh gosh, I don't say, this is what I need, this is what I don't want, this is what I want. And I expect my partner or my family or whatever to just know. They're supposed to just know me, right? Yes, people can learn other people and you can understand tendencies and preferences, but never, ever, ever should it be expected that I don't have to communicate my desires, my wants, my needs, my dislikes, whatever. And those are just known.
Right.
Never ever.
So I'll use an example, a personal example. In dating, I'm very aware of certain traits that bother me, right? I also realize I'm very picky and I pick up on stuff, and while it's minute for somebody else and you're like, okay, it's not really that bad. For me, it's a deal breaker. And passive aggression, I'm discovering, is definitely a deal breaker for me, because I am a person that will tell you, okay, this is getting on my nerves. Like, I want to punch you in the face. I'm not. I just need you to understand this is how I feel in this moment, and what you're doing upsets me.
Yeah.
So dating someone, conversations about sex and different things come up, and you're like, I'm indifferent to that. I don't want to. Or maybe you do, you just haven't gotten to that point. It comes up. And this particular guy wanted it, and I said no. So then I have to deal with I take you out to dinner, I come over, we hang out, we do this, we do that. I'm asking you for one thing and you won't give it to me. And in my mind, I'm like, that's a pretty big thing. And I don't think I'm worth a few Cheesecake Factory dinners at this point. So no, it's still a no. And the conversation goes on. He's like, no, okay, I hear what you're saying. I'm like, are you okay? He says, yeah, I'm fine. I'm great, actually. I was good when I'm fine. But the I'm great, actually, I was like, oh, okay, and got off the phone. But the rest of the day, I'm just like, I can't believe he said that. And in my mind, it's like, okay, let it go. He wasn't okay. Just deal with it later. So I text, I say, what's wrong? Are you okay? So I get this long paragraph of the explanation as to why he doesn't feel like I should be withholding sex from him. All of it is basically, I've done all the good guy things, therefore I am deserving of you. Needless to say, not worked out, didn't work out. It very shortly died after that. But for me, that was, you are not, and I've said it in dating, I've posted it on dating profiles. Your messages, your interest does not entitle you to me. People get offended by something like that, especially guys. They don't like that. They don't like for you to say, I get it, you're interested. If I'm interested, I'm going to respond back. But your interest does not necessarily warrant me reciprocating. So how do you combat something like that? If you're trying to date and you'd like to have a spouse, but those things don't, like those traits bother you, those and part of me is like, is there something in me that I'm not realizing those things trigger?
So I don't know if I would definitely say there's something in you. I think entitlement is an issue across the board nowadays in our society. Like, I put my quarter in, I expect to get a prize. Right? It's simplistically what I put enough quarters in this little slot, I expect to get my prize. And that should not be the case when dealing with any relationship. A machine, yes. A person, no. Right? But that to me doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. But I will say, making sure that you're communicating what it is and what it isn't for you. Yes, I like ketchup. No, I don't like mustard. Yes, I'm willing to date you and get to know you. Here's where my boundaries are, right? And being okay with sharing those up front with people, that's assertive conversation. But somehow we have gotten away from assertive conversation, and it's a taboo thing, right? I can't talk about that up too early, or what if I scare him off, or what if she, wigs out, or right? And people want to kind of slow play their desires, their preferences, their wants, things of that nature. And that, I think, is part of the issue with dating today, is that people have slow played that being assertive, and they feel that maybe it's aggressive where it's not.
That's a whole other conversation. The difference between being an assertive person and an aggressive person, because I think there's a very thin line. Just like I said, you got your aggressive, you're just normal people, and your passive aggressive people. I think I range all of that at times. I tend to be passive aggressive in moments where I feel my response is not going to be received well. So I'll let it slide. So if I know, all right, if I say this out loud, it's going to turn into X, Y, and Z. It's not worth it to me. I'm going to just shut up and move on, which will result in me not talking to someone for a period of time, me avoiding just overall contact with that person, which I know is not okay.
Right.
Depending on the relationship. But for me, I don't want to deal with your stuff. I don't want to deal with your reaction at this point. So I'm going to let it slide. Now, that doesn't mean 6 months from now, I'm not going to go back and address it. It's just in this moment, I'm going to let this slide today.
Devin, that is not a positive way in which to handle that, my love. And
I'm okay with that. I'm aware, which is also why I'm single.
6 months later is not the time in which to bring that thing back around. Okay.
But it's usually triggered by something else that happened. And then it's like, you know what? I saw this 6 months ago and I let it slide. And today you did it again. So we're going to deal with all of it today now because I'm ready.
You know what? And that ties us directly back in to this healing from the unknown, right? Because he didn't know what happened 6 months ago. And for you, you had this triggering, right? And you were like, oh, I remember that from over there, and I remember that from over there, and I'm gonna bring all these puppies up in here right now, and he's gonna feel the wrath of all of them when he's like, what are you talking about? We just had this one experience right here, right? So very much a similar thing that people go through when they didn't realize what had affected them in their past was truly affecting them, or they did realize it and they didn't do anything with it, right? They just kind of stuffed it down, didn't say anything, didn't process. And then when they get hit with stuff like that in the present, they go back and pick up all these extra stuff that they didn't do anything with. And now it's like exponential in how it affects them.
Yeah. So we have James on the call, and one of the things he mentioned in his video was that he went to fix his marriage. Like his marriage was his issue. And that turned into, okay, wait, I got to fix myself in this process now. Mm-hmm. And, in my head, like for me, because I've done a whole lot of work and I just haven't been blessed with a spouse yet, part of me says, all right, I probably shouldn't date right now because I know this is an issue and it's not going to go over well when he realizes like this is a real issue for me. So, but that's easy because there's no one impacted by me saying I'm not going to date right now, right? But in James's situation, he was already married with a kid and realized, wait, in order for me to be good in this marriage, I got to fix me. So advice on that.
Well, first, hey, James, thanks so much for joining us. And thanks so much for yeah, it's okay. And thanks so much for your testimony. I think it was so poignant, and people don't realize exactly what you are going through and what you talked about is a very common issue, right? Where they will go into treatment for one thing and think that that is truly what it is. And then as they start to kind of get into that, they understand, oh, there's a whole bunch of other stuff in the background that's affecting this thing that I was seeking treatment for. And so specifically in the context of kind of your situation, what Devin reflected on is marriage counseling, right? When we go in for marriage work, I always tell couples, and I think I alluded to this, like, one, this is going to get worse before it gets better. Hands off. Session 1, I don't even know what the problem is.
Right.
It's going to get worse before it gets better, because you're going to purposely talk about stuff that you've been swallowing for years, right? Potentially. And your spouse is going to be like, what? Like, when did this become an issue? Or why didn't you say something before? Or, you know what I mean? So, we start to peel back the onion layer. But then 2, I warn both of them that the goal of this work is going to be for you to dig deeper into you, so that when we come back together, this unity can truly be this, right? It can be 2 of you leaning on each other equally, right? This is not a good marriage. This is not a good marriage. This is not a good marriage.
Yeah.
Right? One person in, one person all the way out. Enmeshment. I can't live without you. My life is your life. Your life is my life. Right. But we're leaning on each other equally, right? We're both equally invested. So I tell them, be ready for a whole bunch of individual work while we're working on the unity of the coupleship, is what I like to call it, in session. And most of the time people aren't ready for that. They're ready to do this. Fix her, fix him, fix him, fix him, fix her, right? Like, fix them so we can hurry and be okay. And I'm like, yeah, no, you gonna fix you. And then I'm gonna work on the 2 of y'all together.
Yeah, what was interesting for me is that when I started individual therapy, like, I led with what I thought I was there for. And one of the first things we started working on was my childhood. We went back to, started dealing with mother and father issues and things like that. And both my parents are on Facebook, so it's possible they might see this. So, hey guys. And well, actually, you know what? They came to therapy with me one session, maybe, I don't know, 3 or 4 months ago.
Okay.
They showed up and we worked through some stuff. So it's been kind of it's been a bit of a roller coaster the last year and a half, and I've learned a lot about myself. I've uncovered stuff in my past I wasn't even aware of. Memories that were just buried somewhere, and all these really deep and strong emotions that come flooding to the surface like at unexpected times. And it's honestly, there are times that it's really scary. And I've like, I also found out that I'm a very visual person, because a lot of I get a lot of images more than words and things. So I'm able to, like, we'll be talking about something, I'll describe to my therapist what I'm seeing, and she'll just kind of interpret that, or we'll interpret it together, And I've like one. Well, just to give you one, it's like I was sitting on the beach. I was a 6-year-old sitting on a beach by myself, and like, imagine Galveston Beach, this long beach, nobody's there except me and a few seagulls, and I'm building a sandcastle, and there's this huge ocean in front of me, and there's this giant steel wall that's separating the beach and the water. And every once in a while, a wave will hit the top of the wall and come over and get me a little wet. And the ocean represents, like, all those deep, buried emotions that I've somehow built this steel wall to protect myself from, And so anyway, so stuff kind of comes up like that. And my therapist calls me like a psychic, because it's always like some weird image that, we have to figure out.
But you're a musician, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, well, see, like the falls in my head, I'm like, of course, like, it's going to be artistic, it's going to be visual, it's, even if it was poetic in nature, it's gonna have this kind of artistic flair. You're not gonna be crazy logical and calculated
Yeah.
in your processing of emotions. So
Yeah,
that for me
it's
makes
always interesting. Yeah.
yeah.
He
Yeah.
touched on something that I've actually never heard you talk about, that visual, James, but it makes so much sense now that
Yeah.
you said that to me.
Yeah.
And, you know, he talks about, when he referred to that wall, he said, I built this wall to protect myself, right?
Yeah.
But from his own emotions. Like, and I think that's
Right.
where people get confused. Like, I often get accused of being guarded and having a wall up, and it's like, let me in, let me in. And it's like, the wall's not there for you. I didn't know you when the wall got built.
Right.
I wasn't thinking about you when I started laying that first brick. This
Yeah.
wall is there for me. And I'm
Right.
not just gonna take it down because you want to come in, right? But people don't necessarily understand that.
Yeah.
But I myself, when did the wall start getting built and why? Like, that's the thing. Like, when I think about the walls and the guards that I have up in my life,
Mhm.
some of them I've been able to kind of attribute to things, but I don't know when the wall went up, right? Like, I can remember a period of time where I don't believe there was a wall, but I didn't realize there was a wall until probably like 3-4 years ago.
Yeah.
And I was like, huh, okay, wait. This
Yeah.
is the 10th person that told me I'm not letting them in.
Right.
All of
But I
them
think
can't be crazy.
it seems to me like the important thing is that the wall is for us, right? It's not
Mhm.
it's not so much to protect us from other people. It's to protect us from ourselves, from whatever's
Stuff we don't
inside,
want to
right?
deal with.
The unknown that's inside. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and in that same vein, right? As the therapist, I'm gonna say like,
Why did you put that in quotes?
Because I don't want to be the therapist in this moment, but I'm gonna be right.
I'm the therapist.
I know, but let's not remind everybody. Okay,
Okay.
so we would push you to really dive deep, like your therapist has. I mean, they're probably coming. I'm assuming you have a marriage and family therapist or a family systems. She's using some family systems theory, which I love, and where she's coming from your childhood and breaking that stuff down. But that's usually where the walls start. It's the 6, 7, 8-year-old that's dictating my 40, 45, 50-year-old life, right?
Yes.
And I have to push a little bit some of my clients and be like, can we not have the 6-year-old run your life now? Like, we've got to work to get you to trust you with these emotions, and then therefore maybe be able to trust somebody else as well, right? But we can't let the 6-year-old win, y'all. Like, that just don't make no sense. We 30, 40 years old.
You know, you stepping on a bunch of people's toes that they're not even watching this right now. But a bunch of people, if I'm gonna put this out there and I'm gonna share it on my personal page and everything, because that statement right there is a whole conference by itself. Like, don't let the 6-year-old
Yeah.
run the world at this point, because you wouldn't do it with your kid. Like, you know, at times I do feel like my kids run me. But when you put it in the perspective of, don't let the 6-year-old run your 37-year-old life. I'm 37 years old. And I have to say that there are times where I realize, you know, there were things in my childhood that have dictated everything I've done as an adult, good and bad.
Look, just because I'm educated doesn't mean I'm immune, okay? Like, I've had to do my own fair share of some of that stuff, you know?
Yeah.
So I get it, but I had to do my mirror. I'd look in the mirror and do some work myself on that. So I appreciate it.
I often talk about, you know, being diagnosed with my anxiety disorder at 16. And I can remember being in the doctor's office. She said it, asked my mom if she wanted to explore medication options. And I said, no, I don't want to. And it was done. You know, there was no discussion outside my family as to how to manage it, nothing. We just, okay, she has a panic disorder. And I went on about my life. I was 16, graduate from high school, go to college. I'm holding it together. I mean, I had a few panic attacks, but I have my son and then I completely fall apart. And it was the first time in my life that I acknowledged that I could fail at something and it was the one thing that I could not fail at, right? My whole life, there was no, I had never thought I could fail at anything. So it just worked. But becoming a parent was that one thing. And it was the first time I think people in my life ever said they didn't think I was ready or acknowledged that I wasn't perfect and I wasn't capable of everything. So then I internalized all of that and fell apart. And I just realized that 3 years ago, that it wasn't so much that I didn't think I could do it. It was the one time other people didn't think I could do it. And the one thing that I felt like failing at was going to be worse than anything I could possibly mess up, right? So to know that it took me, my son is 12 now, you know, it took 12 years almost to figure that out, even after having my second kid, right? So, but where it took me, that idea that I could fail at that just kind of broke my entire world. That's where I think the wall started, but I'm still not 100% sure of that. Well, obviously the wall probably started when I was younger, but
The wall started when, I would say, somewhere around that 16-year-old marker, where somebody said, hey, you need something outside of you to make you complete and to make you not fail. I don't need that. What are you talking about? I don't need that. No. We don't need that. I can do it on me. I can do it. That's when the wall started.
yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Even now, I still don't do medication, but I'm also not doing it under my own power. I don't feel like I'm doing it. I lean on it sometimes and then realize, okay, you're going to fall. Stop. You need to call somebody. You need to go to therapy. You need to pray. You need to do these things. Go into the box, pull all the tools out, because your own power is not going to keep you. So, as I said, like this whole healing from the unknown, I got a comment on the promotion of it, and someone's just like, that sounds interesting. And I was like, it is, because, you know, you don't know what's going to fall out of that, you know? It's kind of like when your kids are at home all day. Yes, I'm speaking from personal experience. And they've been eating in your room and on your bed, and then you go to clean it off and you start shaking the sheets out because you're about to wash, and you're like, where did all this stuff come from? Who had chips? Who had M&Ms? You know, that's kind of how I feel sometimes when you go to therapy. It's just like, all right, where'd that come from? How do we get here? We were talking about this. Why are we way off in left field dealing with this right now? So I wondered what it would trigger for people, but for me, it's been, you know, acknowledging that there's still some stuff that I am unaware of, one, and things that I'm aware of that I just don't want to touch right
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, I've said before, like, you are the best advocate for you. So if clients come in and they're like, hey, I want to work on A, B, and C, and I'm like, okay, great. But, you know, A, B, and C are connected to P, Q, and Y over here. And they're like, yeah, maybe P and Q, but I don't want to deal with Y. Like, okay, like that's your call, right? As long as it's not harming you or harming somebody else, you got to take this thing in doses.
So what if Y is my passive aggression when it comes to things that I don't want to deal with right now?
I mean, so we can point Y out. You can be aware of Y.
Okay.
Right? I can let you know, like, hey, you know, you understand that this thing and your relationship dynamics and why all of a sudden these relationships aren't working are because of your daddy issues, right? Daddy issues. I don't have daddy issues. Oh, but ma'am, you do. But if you don't want to touch those, that's your call. But just know these patterns aren't going to change until you begin to deal with said daddy issues. I've said that to many female clients, unfortunately. I hate to say that. But we've, you know.
Are daddy issues more prevalent in women or men?
You know what? I can speak only from the experience I've had with clients.
Okay.
If that's fair. And I've had more women clients than men. When there have been issues with relationships, partnerships, romantic relationships, sometimes even friendships, right? For most women, it's connected to their issues with their father. And for most men, it's connected with issues to their mother.
I
But
figured I was
again,
about to say that.
that's just me. That's my sample of clients. I can't say that that is the theme across the board.
That checks out with me because
Go ahead,
turned
James.
out I had more mother issues than I had both issues, but
Yeah.
the mother issues were more prevalent than the father issues. At least right now, is what it looks like.
Well, so
I'm gonna just say I got both. I think it's equal.
and that's that's fair. Like but again, themes or tendencies, right? Averages, so to speak. And I think it becomes prevalent because there's the romantic angle, right? That those romantic relationships tend to get a lot more of our attention. And I say the majority of the clients that I have worked with specifically have been heterosexual. And so we're talking about those different sex dynamics, right? But if you are a therapist who's working in the same sex kind of community, that thing could look very different. So, yeah.
So, in the work that you talk about to do with this unknown, right? So, what is the most difficult part about, I guess, for both patient and therapist, when you're trying to uncover those things? Like, what is the biggest obstacle? Obviously, you're going to identify the stuff that needs to happen, the things that you recognize because you've got the experience, the education, like this is your thing, right? So what's the biggest obstacle you think on both sides of this? I'm coming in and I'm saying, I need help managing my relationships. I'm single, or I'm married and it's not working out. Like, what is the biggest thing when you go into that situation? You know there's underlying causes up front, usually, right? As a therapist, you know that. So what's the biggest obstacle and how do you overcome that as a patient and as a therapist?
I'd say, well, the biggest obstacle for me as a therapist is hitting the client with that realization that there is something in their past and we can kind of maybe see it. Like said, issues with mother, issues with father, the trauma that may be there that they're not bringing up, right? And it's 6 sessions in and, oh, by the way, I was assaulted when I was a kid, or, and okay, well, this is why you have trust issues. You know what I mean? Like, but bringing that to their attention when they have convinced themselves otherwise, that's hard.
Okay.
That's hard. When they're not maybe ready to receive that news yet, and you gotta kind of break, I don't want to say break them, but it's almost like, okay, here we go, like this is gonna be heavy.
Get through the wall.
You gotta hit it. That's hard, usually for my clients to hear and sometimes for me to say, but again, I know that we've got to get there in order for them to get the healing they need.
So, you touched on, the idea, and you said it in your reflections, that there is sometimes an issue of trauma when we're dealing with the healing from the unknown. Have you experienced where someone, again, referring back to this episode of Station 19, where Meredith Grey is like telling Herrera, I can't think of her actual name, but she's telling her about all of the things the brain does to protect you and how it can twist that. It'll suppress it so much that you don't remember it. It twists into something different than it was. Your body can shut down. And then if it's triggered to come out, like you have all of these other floods of emotion. And she made the statement that she felt everyone else thought she was crazy, but she's like, I know there's something wrong. I know that there's something I'm supposed to be following and finding out here. And Meredith is telling her, your brain is telling you to follow it. Yes, you feel crazy. Do you agree? Have you experienced that in your work with other people? And how do you help them overcome something that was so traumatic that their body just completely decided, we're going to wipe this from your memory and in order for us to move forward.
Well, I can definitely give you from the therapist perspective, and if Jane wants to jump in from the client perspective, I think that would be amazing as well, right? But yes, the brain does that. The brain is miraculous in that it will protect you from yourself sometimes, and we often, I tell clients often that there's an amazing thing that even happens with women where there's a hormone that's released postpartum to kind of help you forget how traumatic childbirth was, so you do it again. Because if you had all the recollection, you feel like maybe you wouldn't go through that puppy again, right? Like the brain is set up that way, and so just think if we have things chemically in our brains to make us forget about procreation and how traumatic that can be on a woman's body, as beautiful as it is, it ain't easy. So
whoever keeps saying that childbirth is beautiful.
We appreciate new life. That's all I'm gonna say.
Babies are cute, but childbirth is not beautiful.
There we go. The end product, I'll take that. The end product is an amazing, lovely thing. The process is not so much an amazing thing. So if we've got it set up to where our brains will do that, just for that experience, if you think about the harmful stuff, like things that have hurt me, things that if I continue to think about it could cause more trauma, could cause more harm, it's going to do that. The body can disassociate from itself, so I could be experiencing something in the physical but mentally not there, right? We know that this can happen during traumatic times as well. So I don't create memories, so I can't continue to relive them. I even say that with grief, right? There are reasons why memories begin to fade of the person that you may have lost or the thing that you may have lost, because if you could continue to remember it as if it was day one, that is so gut-wrenching for you. The body does these things to protect itself. And so, yes, people don't like to hear that that has happened or can happen, but just as much as it's a protective measure to have hunger or thirst when our body is in need of those things, it's a protective measure for us to get rid of those really harmful, traumatic experiences so that we don't keep harming ourselves by thinking about it. And when things come back to clients, as we begin to peel back the onion and talk about what I call the emotional recollection, usually people will feel it first and then the memory will come with it, right? So they'll have an emotional recollection before they'll have the mental memory come back. And when that happens, it's almost as if I feel horrible, but it's almost as if they're reliving it in that moment, because it's like, oh my gosh, I went through that. Like that happened, what, and it's like somebody is bringing a picture book and they're flipping through it and seeing their face all throughout that thing. And so it becomes a moment where I truly try to just allow them to, one, experience it, but not experience it in alone, right? They've got support right there. I'm with you. You're safe. No, this isn't easy, but no, you're not at risk or harm, maybe as you were the first time that you did it. And let's just kind of go through this and know that you're going to feel these emotions, but these emotions aren't going to be forever. This moment isn't going to last forever. It's going to be hard and difficult for a certain period of time, but you can get through to a better place. So it's not fun to sit and experience that with someone, especially when your job is to help them.
And you almost, it's like you said, you kind of have to take them through the hurt in order to get them there. And what was that like for you, James?
Man, there's so much to say about this particular thing. So without getting into too many specifics, there is some trauma that I've experienced in my marriage. And so what Janae said about our brain kind of protecting us at times, I've been learning about euphoric recall, right?
Mm.
And there are times that I'll sit with a journal and I'll try to remember things and just can't. You know what I mean? I'll try to because I know it's it's really easy to remember all the great things about a relationship, about a period of time, and things like that. And but it's also that I've been reading some things, and I've been learning that it's important to document the bad things. So just there, so you remember that they happened, just to kind of keep a good perspective of the whole thing, right? And there are times that I sit down and there was one particular time I remember I was out walking with my dog. I sat on a bench. Specifically, I sat there. I knew I was going to sit there for about 30 minutes, and I wanted with my phone. And I was going to type what I remembered. I was trying to prepare for a therapy session because I knew some things were going to come up, and I was trying to remember, journal, and I'm sorry, I was trying to answer a specific question that was asked of me. And every time I focused on a question, my mind went blank for like 2 or 3 minutes.
Mm.
And I would realize I was just sitting there staring into space for a minute or two. Then I'll come back and I tried 3 or 4 times. I did it. And every time my mind just went away, I'm just sitting there holding a leash, dog looking at me confused, and there's nothing in my brain, you know, and I finally just gave up and just walked home, and that's actually in line with what we've been working on in my therapy. Is so my therapist has told me that I dissociate a good bit, you know. It's a lot of disassociation or dissociation, however you say it,
Mm-hmm.
and so dissociation is one way. At least I found out that my brain has protected me at times, like when things get really intense, I tend to just go away. And it's not like I don't decide to go away, I just kind of go, And there are actually chunks of time in my life. I know where I was, like where I was living. I know what I was doing around that time, but I have no real memories of those times. They're big chunks of time I don't remember. I don't know what was going on. And um, so the dissociation is euphoric recall. So Janae, I don't know if you know, I'm sure you're familiar with this, but there's a technique that my therapist does with me called EMDR.
Hmm.
And we do EMDR 2.0, some new version of it. And it's, at times I feel really, real silly doing it, but it has a way of opening up my subconscious. And we've done this thing where we do it pretty regularly, where we actually, my therapist is kind of like a narrator, a host, and she basically invites all the pieces of me that have to do with a certain event or a certain thing into a conference room.
Hmm.
And we sit down, and so I could talk about this all night. I've met pieces of myself that are so interesting. But talking about protecting yourself, the first, I guess I'd call it a version of myself or first piece of myself that I ever met was this giant gray troll that my therapist invited into the room. It's so weird because I'm talking about this like
It's a great troll coming in the room.
No, but it was so real because I was there. I was in the room, and the room it was like I was in this big room, and there were a lot of people there, and the great troll, this huge great troll, comes in. He has this big club. It's like straight out of a fantasy movie, you know, he has got the big club in his hand. He's a giant, and he immediately starts raging, and it's, you know, it's a little intense. He starts killing everybody in the room, like just raging and just hitting things, and heads are flying. I mean, it's like
Yes.
I was watching him do that, and I mean, I'm telling you, I was in the room. I was there. It was like I would have felt it if something hit me. You know what I mean? And um, he's raging, and at first I was scared and kind of taken back. But the more I watched him, the more I knew that he wouldn't hit me. You know what I mean? It's so interesting. And I'm trying to
So,
I'm trying not to feel it and try to
yeah.
say it.
Well, I'll take a little pressure off for you, James. So,
Yeah.
listening to you talk about it, as Janae said, you being a musician, I've known you since high school, so you know I know James. So when we've shared this story before, and he
Yeah.
told me about this troll,
Oh
it
yeah, I
was
did tell you about that.
hilarious to me because, and I didn't laugh because I know this is serious for him. Because in my head, I'm like, yeah, it makes sense that this would be a part of you because I've always known James to be this very calm, no matter what's going on around him, no matter what people are doing to him or to other people around him, he's very calm, he's very collected. You know, I've never heard him raise his voice. I probably have heard him curse 3 times in all the time I've known him. So when he said that there was this raging troll that he met
Yeah.
that was a piece of him, I'm like, that's where it goes.
Yeah.
He
So I
can't do
found
it. He doesn't do it in the flesh, so he has to do it somewhere else. And in comes Great Troll.
I found out that the Great Troll is a piece of me, and the longer I watched him, my therapist actually started talking to him, and the more she spoke to him, I don't remember what she was saying, but um, I think that was one of the sessions that my trust in her just kind of skyrocketed, because the skill in which she spoke to him, and he calmed down, and the more calm he became, he started to shrink in size, and he became a teenager. Not me. He didn't look like me, but he was a teenager, like I would say 15 or 16. And he was just sitting at the table calmly. But the rage, what was rage and what was attacking anything in sight, became this, it's like this bottomless pit of sadness. And I recently, like that. So he comes up a lot, and he's come up recently in some really um, intense sessions, in like in marriage therapy. Like 2 weeks ago he came up, and so I know that he's there to protect me, because he said so. Because when she started speaking to him, and she asked him, why is he there, basically, why are you there? And he basically said to I don't remember exactly what he said, but it was in effect, I'm here to protect him from anything that I think would hurt him.
James,
And,
can I
yes.
ask, was there a moment of trauma or crisis for you at that age, at 14, 15?
I don't remember a specific event.
Okay.
I remember, so, I mean, well, yeah, I'm sure, I don't know which one. There was a few things.
Sure.
That was middle school and high school. Middle school and part of high school, not all of it, because I was a good enough musician that my trumpet saved me a lot. If I didn't have music, I don't know where I would have wound up. But middle school, in early high school before I met Devin, because I was a senior, she was a freshman when we met, I think. I was pretty heavily bullied.
Okay.
And through elementary too, and because I was always a chubby kid, and there was this condition that a doctor diagnosed me with when I was maybe 11, 12, 13, that I was a chubby kid, and at that age, it was gastro something, but it made it look like I was developing breasts.
Yes.
Like all the fat in my body would like focus here,
Yeah.
And as I got older, it would kind of spread out. But at that age, that's the worst time to. So it'd be summers in Houston, 100 degrees, 100% humidity, and I'm walking around with this big coat on, because I'd rather damn near hyperventilate than let somebody see my chest, So I don't remember a lot of specific events, but I know that things happened. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, and just the fact that as the troll calmed, right, it became a teenagery kind of age and invoked with mostly sadness.
Yeah.
Kind of led me to be like, okay, well, if he's there to protect, then that was his purpose, and that's been his purpose since he maybe was created.
Right.
Right. But again, as Devin said, that was never something that came out. So he was always kind of inward. And so, yeah, EMDR can be very, very powerful in helping people heal from past trauma, PTSD events, things of that nature. It can be used and does amazing work in regards to having the brain light up and heal and focus its energy in certain places where that trauma is, and then working to kind of work through that trauma in that area of the brain. It's amazing work.
Yeah, my therapist and I talk a lot about CPTSD, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, and
trauma on trauma on trauma on trauma.
Right, like trauma over periods of time rather than one specific event, right?
Yeah.
And I actually see the gray troll and the iron wall as the same thing, and the ocean is that deep sadness that the wall is protecting me from.
Absolutely, so that makes a lot of sense.
So Janae, maybe you can tell us, he spoke about this, the disassociation. So you hear it's DID now. It used to be like multiple personalities at one point, if I'm not mistaken. So we talked a few weeks back about compartmentalization and disassociation. So how do you balance that? So I think, it could start with compartmentalization, right? But then if you continue to do that and you don't necessarily go back to address, as I talked about, or, you do just pretend things aren't happening, how likely is it, and how do you prevent yourself from getting to the point where you lose, like you said, chunks of time or periods of time in your life because you just couldn't deal with it at the time, so your mind has blocked it out, or you've created these new identities that serve different purposes for different experiences in your life?
And so, great question, and I think maybe some clarity is needed in what all of those things are, right? So people don't think, oh my gosh, if I compartmentalize, I'm going to develop multiple personality disorder or DID, right? Like,
right.
You
That's
can't
not
do
what it is.
Right. So understanding that, when you compartmentalize things, you were there, right? You were there, you were cognizant, you were aware of what was happening to you. You then decide, hey, this thing is so much that I can't deal with it right now. You make a conscious choice, right? Mm-hmm. That's compartmentalization. When you disassociate or disassociation, as James mentioned, there sometimes isn't a choice. I don't choose to disassociate. It's because it's so emotionally traumatic, emotionally distressing, that if I stay in the moment and feel it and experience it, it's going to be damaging. So my brain decides my body's going to be here, my consciousness is going to be here, right? So that's not a decision. most of the time. I mean, people don't say, I'm going to disassociate now, and then it happens, right? Like it's not how that works. So it's not a choice when you disassociate. Now, if I disassociate and then take on a new persona, take on a new personality, that is the disorder of DID, right? Dissociative identity disorder, right? Or what used to be multiple personality disorder, right? Where I can't even be this person that I am. I gotta leave and become this whole new person. New memories, new feelings, new behaviors, new identity completely, right? So I'm not Janae anymore, but I'll become James. Mm-hmm. And if you can talk to Janae, but I truly believe that I am James, right? So very much different things happening there, right? And then to understand, like when you compartmentalize, you're making, like I said, you're making a choice not to deal with these emotions at the time. Compartmentalization is okay. We said it's even healthy at times, because you've got to pick and choose when it is that you feel that you can do that work that needs to be done. So put it in the bucket. I think the lady was with us. I said, put it in the box. And she said, no, I don't want to put a lid on it, because if I put a lid on it, I may forget. I want to put it in a bucket. I like that.
That was me. I do the buckets.
I like it. I love that, right? Put that in a bucket so you can peek in and be like, okay, yep, it's time to deal with that. And I can pull it out and then deal with that experience, those emotions, those trauma. When I disassociate, I don't have any recollection. So me dealing with the stuff in the bucket's not even there. The bucket doesn't exist. I don't even know I need to be dealing with it until something pokes and reminds me or brings it back to me. Oh my goodness, my body experienced this. Now my consciousness is coming back and remembering, and I'm kind of almost experiencing it in the moment again, right?
Right.
And then DID is its own whole lovely little situation. And way above my pay grade, even though I'm a therapist. It's way above my pay grade.
So I had some questions that came up about last week's live, but I did want to ask. So, and I'll just be transparent. When I was a kid, my brother and I fought a lot physically, and sometimes he hurt me pretty bad. But there came a point where it was mutual. So if he hit me, I finally got to the point where, okay, we're just gonna do this. We're gonna fight. Well, oftentimes my parents downplay it. They forget it. They don't acknowledge that is what took place. Mm-hmm. So in my mind, I'm like, they know it happened. Do they just not want to talk about it? Or could watching that happen have somehow caused them to just change the narrative in their own brains? Because, I have kids now, and I can see how an argument between my kids escalating to the point where I think one might physically harm the other one seriously could be traumatic for me. Like it would hurt me to my core. So is that common that a traumatic experience for someone else or witnessing it can affect you in such a way that you block it out and don't acknowledge that it happened?
Absolutely, it can. Yeah. And that's a really good point. And you will see that with parents specifically, because there's a level of course, responsibility, right? And so it's traumatic for me to see my two children maybe, going at it like this and actually harming themselves. And then it's another layer that I couldn't do enough to prevent it. And then maybe I have some guilt and some shame surrounding it, right? And so all of those emotions together, I can't handle, can't process that. So I need to change the narrative. Oh, it wasn't that bad. Oh, he didn't really hurt you. You know what I mean? Like, and right. So that absolutely can be a piece of it.
Right.
Yeah.
So one of the questions that came up last week, someone viewed the live and also just the conference overall, when you talk about, going to therapy, your therapist shouldn't be a part of your life. Like it shouldn't be a lifelong thing to work on this. You come in and out with triggers. So this person said she has a brother who's decided that because he's got the diagnosis of bipolar and schizophrenia, that is his life. but it makes him not want to go because he's like, this is the rest of my life that I'm going to have to go talk to somebody about this. And to me, I feel like there is a separation between I get depressed, I deal with anxiety, and I have bipolar and schizophrenia, because for me, it's more of a medical imbalance, a chemical imbalance, than I'm dealing with emotions here that I've got to sort through and process and heal from, versus I have an illness that I have to treat. And it's an ongoing thing that I'm going to have to treat the rest of my life.
I would agree with that. The severity of the diagnosis is definitely a part of that equation when we talk about, are you in treatment forever, right? And so when we when we talk about chronic illnesses, right, it's not something that I get to wave in and out of, right? Like if I've had high blood pressure for 30 plus years, I'm probably not going to wave in and out of taking my medication.
Right.
I'm going to need to take it consistently, right? And that's the rest of my life, unless there's some other drastic changes I get to make to my physiology to change that thing, right? Losing 100 plus pounds or something of that nature, right? So when we're talking about some levels of bipolar disorder, not all levels, but severe levels of bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, sometimes personality disorders, that's our narcissism, that's our DID, those are those really difficult borderline personality. Those are chronic mental illnesses. That's not what we call the common cold of mental illness or the flu of mental illness, right? So they're not like smaller, I need a hit of treatment and then I could phase out.
Right.
This is a bigger thing, and that is probably going to be lifelong treatment. Yeah.
So how do you give hope to someone like that, who, when that person is like, I don't want to go, I don't even want to start because I know I'm never going to get past this. This isn't going to end for me. It's hopeless. Let me just take the meds and move on with my life.
Well, I think that we get into quality of life conversation at that point, right? Because yes, you may have a chronic mental illness, but that doesn't mean life is over, right? You can learn tools, techniques that can make your quality of life better. And so just wrapping my head around, if it was, like you said, if it was diabetes, I know that I've then got to deal with my diet, my sleep, my movement in order to have a better quality of life, right? So that I'm not maybe in pain, I don't have other symptoms, extreme measures, maybe amputation, right? I don't have to do those things. I can have a better quality of life overall. So hope comes in quality of life at that point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you again. I think this has a lot of information in it, and we've gotten into some like different diagnoses, which is something I don't think we talk enough about. You know, we always talk about mental illness and mental health and stability in this broad topic of things, and the reality is there's a vast array of things that have to be treated, and you have to treat them all differently, and each person has to treat their diagnosis differently. And I used to get frustrated because I would always get the diagnosis of depression and anxiety, and I'm like, okay, but what do I do with that? Because it's vague. You know, am I bipolar? Can we get that diagnosis? But I've never gotten it, right? So, you know, and it's really crazy because it took, a friend of mine actually called the police for a welfare check on me, because this particular day I decided that I had been given all of this medication, one of it being Xanax. And that day I decided I wanted to drink. And it was like 5 o'clock in the afternoon for a happy hour. But when I was ready to go to bed, I was kind of at the point where I was still dependent on the Xanax to go to sleep. So I couldn't fall asleep on my own. And I text, forgetting she's a registered nurse and she understands that this isn't logical. I say, hey, I had vodka today. How soon can I take Xanax? cops were at my house in 30 minutes. And I was like, no, I really just needed to know if I could take the Xanax or if I just needed to accept I was going to be awake all night.
Right.
Because I didn't need to take the Xanax. I wasn't trying to hurt myself. And the police officer said to me, you don't understand how blessed and lucky you are.
Mm.
And I looked at him, I was like, what do you mean? You're at my house checking to make sure I'm not trying to kill myself. And he said, but I can look at you and tell you're not trying to kill yourself. I can look at you and tell that you genuinely had a question, and you have friends that obviously love you enough to not let you flounder in the event that that was a serious thing that you were going to do. He said, I've come on welfare calls and people are climbing the walls because they're high off of whatever medication they've been given that they mismanaged. You know, they've already taken the Xanax and the alcohol together, and we're calling EMTs. You're like, you're blessed in the fact that you understand what's going on. You're lucid. You can make this decision. You can stand here and have a conversation with me about the tools that you have in place and the people you can call and how you're not in that place. And I can trust that that's happening. That doesn't happen on every one of these calls. And, you know, as I said, you know, I wanted a definitive diagnosis, so I knew what was going to happen with the rest of my life. Tell me I'm bipolar. Okay. Give me the medication and we're good. But the depression and anxiety to me was, oh wait, so I really got to do a lot of work. Like, this isn't just to throw some pills at me. We're going to balance my brain and I'm going to be okay. Which is when I realized there's more to it than a chemical imbalance. There's more to it than I didn't pray enough. There's more to it than I had a baby and my hormones didn't settle in quite right. So, you know, it was eye-opening, and this is why I try to incorporate all three, because it all factors in. But I also know that with my depression, I can't sit in my house in the dark all day anymore. That was a thing at one point. I don't feel like going, so I'm gonna shut the lights off. I'm gonna close the blinds, and I'm gonna sleep. But I know now when I feel depressed, even if it hurts, even if my limbs feel like lead, I'm just gonna go outside and walk, even if it's 10 minutes, because if anything else, that was a victory, right? So I appreciate that we can get into these conversations now, because we don't talk about those chronic illnesses often enough. Like, we want to tell people, oh, you can live this abundant and beautiful life, but we forget that there is an aspect of mental health and mental illness that is lifelong, that has to be treated consistently. You know, you won't get that euphoric, I was bipolar 5 years ago, now I'm not situation, but quality of life, like you said, you know, you don't hear a lot of people that get a diagnosis of diabetes and their life is over. They might complain because they can't have cheesecake anymore or buttercream icing. For me,
Hey, Devin,
go ahead.
We have time for one more question
Sure.
to Janae. And if this will take too long to answer, we need to do it another time. I get that.
Okay.
I'm dealing with a sort of an issue in marriage therapy where, well, let me see. The question is about trusting your therapist.
Okay.
And I'm at a place where my marriage therapist and my individual therapist disagree about me.
Okay.
Because they've consulted together a couple times and they disagree. The marriage therapist just thinks I'm depressed and she doesn't see the dissociation. My therapist, who's been with me for a year and a half, insists that there is dissociation and it's not just depression.
Sure.
And there has been depression, but it's been a symptom of other things. So I'm at a place where I trust my marriage therapist a little less because she's suggested that, well, how do I say this without being specific? She's suggested a direction in therapy for me that I don't agree with,
Okay.
and my therapist doesn't agree with.
Okay.
And so I'm at a place where I'm trying to
what do you do next, right?
Yeah, what do I do?
Okay.
I'm trying to work with both,
Right.
and it's a little difficult.
Absolutely. And we always say like the treatment team coming together and understanding the dynamics of everybody is the best case scenario. So we don't run into situations like this, but it does happen where two service providers or two clinicians may not agree on the best route for treatment. It happens, right? I
Mhm.
think for marriage therapy, both clients have got to be comfortable with the process. And so if there's an element of not being able to be comfortable with that, that itself needs to be addressed in treatment, right? I would want my client to come to me and be like, hey, we're going this route. I'm not feeling it. And so
Mhm.
we can talk about it, right? So I can maybe say, here's why I chose this route. Here's why I chose this theory base. Let's talk about it, because if you're not on board, there's no point.
Right.
Right. And
Yeah.
so if you keep going to this marriage therapist, and even though your spouse may feel or your partner may feel that this is a good fit, again, if 50% of the equation is not on board, it's
Mhm.
not working.
Right.
No matter what, it's not going to work. So I think I would suggest really going into that marriage counseling setting and really talking about the discord that's
Yeah.
happening, so that everybody can try to get back on the same page, because it sounds like you've invested some time and effort into that therapeutic relationship, and just to dish it, it would
Yeah.
not be
Well,
cool.
and we've been there since January, so
So
5 months.
yeah,
And,
5 months. Yeah.
and I sent her a long email last week, kind of just because it was two. So we do a bi-weekly session. In our last session, I was feeling really emotional, and I wasn't able to like really express effectively with my words what I was feeling and why I was feeling them and things like that. So it took me about a week to kind of decompress it all and put it in email form. So I sent a long email to her, and um, like I was like seriously questioning a few of her treatment directions. Like I didn't understand one. I didn't understand why she didn't meet with us individually, my wife and I, to kind of get our stories, and then we come together and so on. But I get that's all her prerogative how she's gonna do the treatment. And so anyway, the point is that I sent an email today. We had a session this morning, and we talked through a bit of it, and so I'm there's compromise on my side to see if we can meet somewhere in the middle,
Okay.
still work together. So, but I just thought it's just the relationship aspect of therapy is so interesting to me, that it's an actual relationship you have with your therapist, and if the trust isn't all the way there, then you're wasting time. Yeah.
I think I've said that just about every single time I've sat down
Right.
with Devin.
Yes.
Yeah, it doesn't matter, right? And we're taught that in school as well, right? Like the therapeutic relationship, the rapport that's built, that's the foundation of treatment. If you don't have that, doesn't matter what tools, techniques, theory base, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
They won't work. So I'd say continue if you can to see if you can work through that, for the sake of the time you put in and for your wife, and if she feels comfortable and it's a good touch there. But when you don't feel it's not it's not working for you,
Yeah.
speak up.
Well, I fired the last marriage therapist because it wasn't working out. So
Okay. Yeah.
I didn't want to do that 2 in a row, because then I started thinking, well, what's my problem? So
Well, it is a different dynamic. I will say individual treatment and marriage treatment, definitely the approach is different. So be prepared for that. But even still, you got to feel comfortable.
right.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you for joining us, James, and thank you for being transparent. The feedback I've received this week has been great, because what they said was seeing a man talk about this is refreshing. It opens your eyes to the fact that there's no gender specific thing when it comes to mental illness, that we all suffer, we all deal with it, we all have to have these conversations, and being transparent about your relationship and being abused and stuff like that. Because again, a conversation that we typically only see one side of, and you know, all the advocates talk about that one side. So I know it wasn't easy. I know that it was hard to share and not be specific, and you know, it may have felt like you were taking a huge risk, you know, opening up and sharing this with, you know, the world at this
Everybody's
point.
on Facebook.
Anybody on Facebook that wants to watch it can see it. So, you know, there's a risk in that to share. You know, I went for marriage. I'm in marriage counseling. You know, these things happen to me. So I get that it's not easy, and everybody doesn't freely share these things like I do. So I really appreciate you doing that. And Janae, once again, like, you always bring something new to the conversation, and I appreciate that you are willing to give this to us without us having to make an appointment, because that is the fear of a lot of people, you know.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to go to therapy because I don't know what this therapist is supposed to do. I don't know, you know, how this therapist is going to feel, as though, you know, you haven't dealt with their diagnosis before. You know, I've had people say, I got too many issues to go to a therapist. They're not going to want to help me. They're going to give up. You know,
And I've heard clients come in and be like, am I too far gone? Is there anything you can do? And I'm like, well, like, you know, this isn't a gunshot wound. Like, you know, it's not, you know, we gonna work together in this thing.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Yeah, well, that's true.
Right. And your emphasis on it not just being one-sided. Like, anyone that watches this conference and watches Paul should now know that it's a two-sided thing, and most of the work really has to be on the patient, which I boldly proclaim that I am a patient, and I'm okay with that, because, you know, I still have stuff to work through. And clearly we talked about, I hate dating passive-aggressive people, but I can be passive-aggressive, and that's cool, right? That's fine. It's fine.
She's a work in progress, everybody. She's a work in progress.
You know, we all know everybody has their stuff, and I freely share mine. I'm open about it, but it's nice to have a therapist be able to have this conversation, and you don't cringe when we talk about things, and, you know, make us feel like we are patients in this. It's like a conversation, whereas that's what therapy is, and people can kind of see that based on how you handle these lives and your reflection. So I greatly appreciate it. And, you know, with that, I can close out, and we will have happy hour tomorrow. Happy hour is kind of fun. It's not necessarily focused on the topic, but everybody has a chance to check in, and, you know, at times it'll go there. It went there last week, where we started talking about issues and, you know, trying to help diagnose a couple people on the call. We might need you tomorrow, now that I think about it.
I may or not be busy. I don't know.
You may need to be on the call tomorrow. You know, people with alcohol change, okay? You see a different side of people. Yes. It's a happy hour. It's bring your own drink, obviously, but it is a happy hour, so it's not 100% professional, but we can relax and have conversations, and you can diagnose all of us by the time it's all over with. So again, thank you guys, and do this again next week. It's the last week, and it's my topic of healing from self-inflicted wounds.
Good topic.
Yeah. You seem too excited about that. Saw our face, James. We got super excited. So.
I got a lot to say about that.
Uh-oh.
James, maybe
not me. I'm saying I'd say.
I feel like I just exposed one of them tonight, but it's okay. It's okay. So thank you again, and I'll see y'all hopefully tomorrow at 5:30.
Yep. See you tomorrow.
Good evening,
Bye.
everybody.
Good evening, guys.
You.